Letter 83 by Charles Lamb. Late February 1801. You masters of logic ought to know, logic is nothing more than a knowledge of words, as the Greek etymon implies, that all words are no more to be taken in a literal sense at all times than a promise given to a tailor. When I expressed an apprehension that you were mortally offended, I meant no more than by the application of a certain formula of efficacious sounds, which had done in similar cases before, to rouse a sense of decency in you, and a remembrance of what was due to me. You masters of logic should advert to this phenomenon in human speech, before you arraign the usage of us dramatic geniuses. Imagination is a good blood mare and goes well, but the misfortune is she has too many paths before her. 'Tis true I might have imaged to myself that you had trundled your frail carcass to Norfolk. I might also, and did imagine that you had not, but that you were lazy, or inventing new properties in a triangle, and for that purpose moulding and squeezing landlord Crisp's three-cornered beaver into fantastic experimental forms, or that Archimedes was meditating to repulse the French, in case of a Cambridge invasion, by a geometric hurling of folios on their red caps, or peradventure that you were in extremities in great wants, and just set out for Trinity Bogs when my letters came. In short, my genius, which is a short word nowadays for what a great man am I, was absolutely stifled and overlaid with its own riches. Truth is one and poor, like the cruse of Elijah's widow. Imagination is the bold face that multiplies its oil, and thou the old cracked pipkin, that could not believe it could be put to such purposes. Dull pipkin, to have Elijah for thy cook, imbecile recipient of so fat a miracle. I send you George Dyer's poems, the richest production of the lyric muse this century can justly boast, for Wordsworth's L.B. were published, or at least written, before Christmas. Please to advert to pages 291 to 296 for the most astonishing account of where Shakespeare's muse has been all this while. I thought she had been dead, and buried in Stratford Church with the young man that kept her company. But it seems like the devil buried in Coal Harbour. Some say she's risen again, gone prentice to a barber. N.B. I don't charge anything for the additional manuscript notes, which are the joint productions of myself and a learned translator of Schiller, John Stoddart-esque. N.B. the second. I should not have blotted your book, but I had sent my own out to be bound, as I was in duty bound. A liberal criticism upon the several pieces, lyrical, heroical, amatory, and satirical, would be acceptable. So you don't think there's a word's worth of good poetry in the great L.B. I daren't put the dreaded syllables at their just length, for my back tingles from the northern castigation. I send you the 3 letters, which I beg you to return along with those former letters, which I hope you are not going to print by your detention. But don't be in a hurry to send them. When you come to town will do. Apropos of coming to town, last Sunday was a fortnight, as I was coming to town from the professor's, inspired with new rum, I tumbled down and broke my nose. I drink nothing stronger than malt liquors. I am going to change my lodgings, having received a hint that it would be agreeable, at Our Lady's next feast. I have partly fixed upon most delectable rooms, which look out, when you stand a tiptoe over the Thames and Surrey hills, at the upper end of King's Bench walks in the Temple. There I shall have all the privacy of a house without the encumbrance, and shall be able to lock my friends out as often as I desire to hold free converse with my immortal mind. For my present lodgings resemble a minister's levee. I have so increased my acquaintance, as they call 'em, since I have resided in town. Like the country mouse that had tasted a little of urban manners, I long to be nibbling my own cheese by my dear self without mousetraps and time-traps. By my new plan, I shall be as airy, up 4 pair of stairs, as in the country, and in a garden in the midst of that enchanting, more than Mahometan paradise, London, whose dirtiest drab-frequented alley and her lowest bowing tradesman, I would not exchange for Skiddaw, Helvellyn, James, Walter, and the parson into the bargain. Oh! Her lamps of a night, her rich goldsmiths, print shops, toy shops, mercers, hardware men, pastry cooks, St. Paul's Churchyard, the Strand, Exeter Change, Charing Cross with the man upon a black horse, these are thy gods, O London. Ain't you mightily moped on the banks of the Cam? Had not you better come and set up here? You can't think what a difference. All the streets and pavements are pure gold, I warrant you. At least I know an alchemy that turns her mud into that metal, a mind that loves to be at home in crowds. 'Tis 12:30 o'clock, and all sober people ought to be abed. Between you and me, the lyrical ballads are but drowsy performances. See Lamb, as you may guess. Lamb refers in his opening sentences to a letter from himself to Manning which no longer exists. In Manning's last letter, dated February 24, He complains that he found on returning to Cambridge 3 copies of a letter from Lamb, suggesting that he was offended because he had not answered. The passage in George Dyer's poems between pages 291 and 296 is long, but it is so quaint and so illustrative of its author's mind that I give it in full, footnotes and all, in the appendix to this volume. Stoddart we have already met. He had translated with Georg Heinrich Noten Schiller's Fieso, 1796, and Don Carlos, 1798. The copy of Dyer's poems annotated by Lamb and Stoddart I have not seen. So you don't think there's a Wordsworth? Manning had written on February 24, 1801, of the second volume of Lyrical Ballads, "I think T's utterly absurd from one end to the other. You tell me T's good poetry. If you mean that there is nothing puerile, nothing bombast or conceited, everything else that is so often found to disfigure poetry, I agree, but will you read it over and over again? Answer me that, Master Lamb. The 3 letters containing the northern castigation are unhappily lost. My back tingles. Back is not Lamb's word. I am going to change my lodgings. The Lambs were still at 34 Southampton Buildings. They moved to 16 Mitre Court Buildings just before Lady Day, 1801. James, Walter and the Parson, in Wordsworth's poem The Brothers. Exeter Change, which stood where Burley Street now is, was a great building, with bookstalls and miscellaneous stalls on the ground floor and a menagerie above. It was demolished in 1829.